There's a moment when everything shifts, when the weight of 1,000 little suspicions finally crashes down in a single, undeniable instant. For me, that moment came on a gray Thursday afternoon, behind the wheel of my truck, with my son's life possibly hanging in the balance. I was halfway to the hospital when I found out Melissa had lied. Alex's school called me at 1:17 p.m. The tone in the nurse's voice told me it was serious before she even got to the part about the ambulance. He fell hard on the main stairwell during the switch between periods, she explained. Compound fracture. Possibly some head trauma. He's awake, but disoriented. I didn't even ask how it had happened. I just said I was on my way and hung up. I'd never driven that fast in my life. I shouldn't have. My hands were trembling on the wheel, vision narrowed, the GPS screaming reroutes while I darted through traffic like a man possessed. My first instinct, my every instinct, was to call Melissa. She didn't pick up. I tried again and again. For calls. Straight to voicemail. Not even a single ring. Her last message to me was from the night before, a photo of the hotel lobby in Chicago, a glass of wine on the table, and a caption that read, "Wish you were here. Long day of panels tomorrow." I didn't think twice at the time. Melissa worked in strategy and brand development for a mid-sized agency in Grand Rapids. Every quarter, she went to Chicago for some two-day session. It had become routine. And yet, something about this time felt off. She'd packed more than usual. Said she didn't want me texting her unless it was urgent. When I kissed her goodbye, she turned her cheek at the last second. I remember laughing it off, but it lingered. Now, with my son in an ER and her phone silent, that feeling was coming back like a knife to the ribs. I pulled off the highway near an old gas station and parked crooked in front of a no overnight parking sign. That's when I made the call to her office. I didn't want to, but I had to. Brightpoint Media, this is Kara. Hey Kara, this is Lucas Reed, Melissa's husband. I've been trying to reach her. There's been an emergency with our son. She's at the strategy session in Chicago, right? There was a pause. I remember it vividly. The sound of papers shuffling. Then her voice, a little uncertain. Chicago? No, sir. She's not in the office. Hasn't been all week. She requested unpaid leave starting Monday. My mouth went dry. I'm sorry, she said she was going to Chicago. She told me she had a work retreat. More silence. I'm not sure what to say. She submitted paperwork for personal travel. To Kansas. Kansas? That's what it says. She hasn't been in contact with anyone from the team. I think she said it was family related. Melissa has no family in Kansas. Not a cousin, not a distant aunt. I would know. I've been to every family reunion and holiday for the last 13 years. I ended the call without another word and sat there for a full minute, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My mouth opened slightly as if to say something, but nothing came out. I felt frozen, like my brain was trying to rewrite what I just heard into something more palatable. Unpaid leave? Kansas? I peeled out of that gas station like my tires were on fire. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I saw the hospital in the distance and let out this tight, broken exhale. Everything in me was screaming fear for Alex, and now this dissonance that refused to quiet down. Melissa lied. She lied. And still, some part of me hoped she'd walk through those hospital doors and make sense of everything. Maybe it was a surprise trip? Maybe Kara was wrong? But no. When she finally arrived 2 hours later, I knew. She was still wearing the same dress she'd left in, a navy blue wrap I always liked because it hugged her in a way that made her look confident and professional. Now it looked slept in. Wrinkled, slightly damp at the hem. Her hair was up in a rush twist and her makeup had faded. But it wasn't just her appearance, it was the smell. Not her usual perfume. Something unfamiliar. Earthy. Masculine. Her eyes had that glazed look of someone startled awake, like she'd been pulled from a different reality and dropped into mine. She ran into the hospital like a guilty student late for class. I met her just outside Alex's room. She barely looked at me. No, where is he? No, what happened? Just this frantic scramble to check in with the nurse to ask if she could see him. She didn't even ask me. And I just stood there, watching the woman I'd built my life around, realizing in real time that I didn't know her anymore. After she spoke with the nurse and got the green light to go in, I pulled her aside. Gently but firmly. Melissa, I said, where were you? Her eyes flashed. What? You told me you were in Chicago. But your office says you're on unpaid leave. They said you were in Kansas. Melissa, what's going on? The way she squared her shoulders told me more than her words ever could. I was in Chicago, she snapped. I just didn't tell them. They don't need to know everything I do. God, Lucas, do you really have to interrogate me right now? Our son is in the hospital. I tried to call you 5 times. You were unreachable. I needed space. That was her answer. Not I'm sorry. Not I had bad reception. Just I needed space, like that justified the complete radio silence, the lie to her employer, and the hours she left me twisting in the wind. I should have pushed harder. But I was tired. Worried sick about Alex. And honestly, I was scared of what I'd hear if I pressed further. So I let her go into the room and stayed behind, hands clenched in my pockets, staring at the white tile floor like it held the answers. And maybe it did. Maybe it always had. I just stopped looking. Later, as I sat in a stiff hospital chair waiting for an update, I kept replaying our last week together in my head like a highlight reel of every missed sign. The way Melissa flinched when I tried to hug her goodbye. The way she avoided my eyes when I said I loved her. The way her suitcase was packed too quickly, too lightly. Now it all made sense. Or, more accurately, it no longer had to. The truth was already showing itself. This wasn't about a single lie. This was the beginning of a collapse. And I was finally hearing the first crack. There's this eerie quiet in hospitals at night. The kind where the fluorescent lights feel too bright, like they're highlighting every crack in your soul. That's where I found myself, alone in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and stale vending machine coffee, watching the minute hand twitch forward, pretending I wasn't unraveling. Alex was in surgery. They needed to repair the compound fracture, run scans to make sure there was no swelling in his brain. The nurse said he was stable, but I'd heard that tone before, clinical calm masking the fact that nobody was ready to promise anything yet. Melissa was with him now. She didn't ask me if I wanted to switch places. I didn't offer. We both played our parts like actors in a scene we'd rehearsed too many times. Left to my own thoughts, I tried to distract myself. Failed. I kept circling the same question like a dog chewing a bone it couldn't swallow. What else have I missed? And that's when it started, this reel of memories unspooling with brutal clarity. Melissa's late nights had started about a year ago. At first, it made sense. New client accounts, deadlines, agency rebranding. She was climbing fast and I was proud of her. But then it got weird. Texts would go unanswered. Phone calls sent to voicemail. She started saying things like, I just need a little space when I'm working. It's exhausting having to always check in. Then came the trips. Chicago, Dallas, Baltimore, always with just enough planning to sound real, but vague on the details. She never sent selfies from the hotel. No photos of coworkers, no stories about the sessions. And when she came back, she was different, distant, like she was still somewhere else. I remember one night in particular. It was late December, right before Christmas. Snow was coming down in sheets. She texted saying her flight had been delayed. I waited up for her, made hot chocolate like an idiot. When she finally walked in around 2 a.m., her hair was damp, but her coat was bone dry. She said the airline lost her bag. She went straight to bed. The next morning, I found a receipt in the pocket of that same coat for a hotel in our own city. I asked her about it. She didn't flinch. Oh, she said, I got in so late, I didn't want to risk driving in the snow. It was just for a few hours. I meant to tell you. But she never did. I believed her anyway. Because that's what love does, right? It fills in the blanks. It gives you a reason to ignore the scream in your gut. Another memory hit me, our anniversary this past June. 10 years. I booked a cabin up north, just the 3 of us. Alex had been excited to go fishing. Melissa said she couldn't make it. Client emergency, she claimed. Some launch she just had to oversee. So I went with Alex alone. We caught trout and made pancakes and skipped rocks across the lake. Melissa sent one text that weekend, tell Alex I love him. No, I miss you. No call. When we got back, she didn't even ask to see the pictures. I used to chalk it up to stress. That's the lie I told myself the most. Melissa was ambitious, I'd say. Focused. Driven. But the truth is, she wasn't just busy, she was absent. Not physically gone all the time, but emotionally miles away. I was sharing a house with someone who felt like a stranger with my wife's face. She'd stopped engaging with Alex months ago. Before, she used to quiz him about school, come to his soccer games, help with his science projects. Lately, she barely acknowledged him. He noticed too. Mom's always tired. He told me one night as I tucked him in. She forgets stuff I tell her. It was true. She forgot his spelling bee. She missed parent-teacher conferences. And when I reminded her, she looked annoyed. Annoyed. Like I was pestering her, not talking about her own kid. And there was her phone, always upside down on the table, always on silent. Once, I picked it up by reflex when it buzzed. She snatched it out of my hand like I'd pulled the pin on a grenade. said I was being controlling. Controlling. That word hit me hard. She started using it more often. "You're smothering me," she'd say. "You don't trust me anymore." But what was I supposed to trust? The silences? The evasions? The way her whole body flinched when I reached out to touch her? And Macy had vanished, too. We used to be affectionate. Not just in bed, but in the way we moved. Passing kisses, shared glances, small touches in the kitchen. But all of that faded, one little moment at a time. The last time I tried to pull her into a hug, she laughed, and said, "Not now. I'm not in the mood. Not now. Not ever." And yet I kept making excuses. For her. For us. I told myself every couple goes through phases. That 10 years was a long time. That marriage takes work. But now, sitting in this cold room with nothing but time and regret, I couldn't stop thinking. Maybe I'd been working alone. Maybe she had already left months ago and just hadn't told me yet. That thought gutted me more than I expected. I wasn't just losing a wife. I was losing the version of our life I thought was real. The bedtime stories with Alex. The porch coffees. The inside jokes. I started questioning everything. Were those moments real for her? Or just routine? I stared down at my hands. They were shaking, and I hadn't even noticed. Somewhere in the hallway, a machine beeped, followed by hurried footsteps. I looked up, heart in my throat, but it wasn't for us. Time ticked on. Melissa texted once from inside the room. "He's still under. They're saying he'll be okay. Doctors are just waiting for him to wake up." No apology. No concern for how I was holding up. Just clinical facts. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was distance. This wasn't just a rough patch. It wasn't burnout. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a fracture. Not just in Melissa, but in us. One that had started small. Invisible. Hairline. But now it was widening. Fast. Loud. Unfixable. And for the first time, I stopped hoping it would go back to the way it was. I just wanted the truth. Even if it broke me. I didn't sleep that night. Even after Alex was moved to a room and the doctors said the surgery had gone well. I couldn't shut my eyes for more than a minute. Melissa took the fold-out cot next to his bed. Like nothing had changed between us. She dozed off almost immediately, curled under a thin hospital blanket, her breathing soft and even. I watched them both. My son and the woman I used to trust with my life, and all I felt was distance. It was like watching strangers through a window. The nurse brought me coffee around 4 a.m. I thanked her and stepped into the hallway. The hospital was mostly quiet, save for the occasional beeping monitor or muffled conversation from behind a curtain. I found an empty bench by the vending machines and just sat there, trying to collect my thoughts. But they kept slipping out of my grasp. Every red flag that had once felt ignorable was now screaming in my head. But screaming isn't proof. And part of me still wanted to be wrong. Still hoped I'd find some explanation that didn't end in betrayal. So I went looking. Our house still had a landline. Not because we needed it, but because it had been there forever. Melissa used to joke about canceling it, but she never did. And somewhere in my half-awake haze, I remembered something. The blinking red light on the answering machine when I'd stopped by the house earlier to grab a change of clothes. I hadn't checked it then. Just assumed it was some telemarketer or a reminder call from the dentist. But now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I left the hospital around 6:30 that morning. Told Melissa I was heading home to shower and grab a few things for Alex. She barely nodded, still in that distant autopilot mode. The house was dark and quiet when I got there. I dumped my overnight bag on the floor and headed straight for the kitchen. The machine's red light blinked like it had been waiting for me. 5 messages. The first 3 were nothing. A PDA announcement, a spam call, a reminder about a subscription I forgot to cancel. The 4th made my blood freeze. "Hey babe, it's me. Just wanted to say last night was incredible. You make it hard to go home, you know? I keep thinking about that thing you said. About starting over. We can do it, Mel. Just say the word." Click. No name. No number. Just that voice, casual, warm, too familiar. A man who wasn't nervous, wasn't hiding. This wasn't some drunk voicemail from a one-time mistake. This was a man who felt safe, who believed he was part of something lasting. My hand hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't press it. Instead, I sat down on the cold tile floor back against the fridge and played it again and again. Each time I caught more, his tone, the pauses, the way he said Mel like it belonged to him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left the shell behind. The fifth message was from the same voice. Hey, just checking to make sure you transferred the rest this morning. I know you said he's getting suspicious, but don't worry, we'll figure it out. Worst case, I'll take the heat if he finds the records. Just keep your phone close. Transfer the rest. He's getting suspicious. I sat there for a long time, unable to move, barely able to think. There was no coming back from this. Whatever I thought I still believed about Melissa, about our marriage, was gone. These weren't random missteps. This was a pattern, a secret life, one with money involved, planning, comfort, and lies. When I went back to the hospital later that morning, I didn't say anything right away. Melissa looked up from her phone when I walked in but didn't ask where I'd been. How's Alex? I asked, my voice flat. Still asleep. Doctor says he might be discharged by Monday. I nodded and sat beside the bed, watching our son breathe. I wanted to wait, to find the right time, but the words were already coming out before I could stop them. I heard your voicemail. She looked up, confused. What? From him? I said. The guy. The one you spent last night with. Or the night before. Or the last dozen times you've told me you were in Chicago, or Dallas, or wherever else you weren't. Her face drained of color, but she didn't panic. She didn't shout. She just stared at me like she was calculating her next move. You went through my phone? I laughed, sharp and humorless. No. Landline. You remember the landline? It still works. Lucky me. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. He called you Mel. Lucas. He said last night was incredible. Said you were talking about starting over. That he'd take the heat if I found out about the transfers. Does any of that sound familiar? And then it happened. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, I didn't plan for it to happen this way. That sentence. That was the moment it all snapped into place. She wasn't sorry for doing it. She was sorry I found out. I gave you everything, I said, not even trying to keep my voice down. I covered the bills so you could chase your dream. I picked up the slack with Alex every night you were working late. I trusted you when every instinct in me said not to. And this is what you've been doing. She rolled her eyes like she was tired of the whole scene. Don't act like you were some perfect husband. You stopped trying years ago. I stared at her in disbelief. You want to talk about trying? I hissed. I stayed. Even when you checked out. Even when you stopped showing up for me, for Alex. I thought you were overwhelmed. I thought you were sick, Melissa. Turns out you were just busy building a new life behind my back. She didn't respond. Just stood up and walked toward the window, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. I needed something that made me feel alive again, she said finally, her voice low. Everything with us just felt dead. And your son? Was he part of that death too? Because you've been gone from him just as much as you've been gone from me. Silence. I stood up, not trusting myself to stay in the same room any longer. You know what's dead now? I said, opening the door to the hallway. Whatever shred of trust one had left. You buried it. And then I walked out, leaving her standing there, surrounded by beeping monitors and the weight of her own choices. The walk down that hospital hallway felt longer than it was. My legs moved like they didn't belong to me, carrying me past nurses in wheelchairs and bulletin boards with faded cartoons. I don't even remember leaving the building. All I know is 1 second I was beside Alex's room, and the next I was outside, blinking into the mid-morning sun, half wondering if this was all some elaborate hallucination. But it wasn't. The voicemail was real. Melissa's expression when I confronted her was real. And her reaction, that cold, defensive shrug, was the final nail. I drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Just the sound of the road and my pulse thudding in my ears. By the time I stepped through the front door, something in me had changed. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't trying to make sense of it. I was done searching for justifications or explanations. Now I wanted evidence. I wanted everything. If she was going to lie to my face, I was going to meet her with truth she couldn't spin. The first thing I noticed when I walked in wasn't a missing suitcase or some dramatic, cinematic sign of betrayal, it was the details. Little things that had gone unnoticed until now. An extra toothbrush in the downstairs bathroom. A second glass, rinsed and left on the drying rack. A receipt from a motel off I-96 tucked into the junk drawer. Melissa wasn't being careful anymore because she thought she didn't need to be. The house still smelled like her, faintly floral with the trace of that expensive shampoo she liked. But now, that scent felt like a mask over something rotten. I started going room to room. Not frantically, not in a rage. Just methodically. Looking. Documenting. Gathering. The bedroom was the hardest. Not because of what I found, but because of what I felt. Our bed had become a symbol of everything I'd lost. I sat on the edge for a minute, staring at the nightstand where she used to keep a paperback and a lavender-scented lotion. Both were gone now. Replaced by a charger she no longer used and an untouched candle from some gift set I gave her last year. In the closet, I found a small zip pouch tucked in the back, behind her winter boots. Inside, receipts, hotel keys, and a bottle of perfume I didn't recognize. Not her usual one. This one was stronger, muskier. And next to it? A tie. Not mine. I took pictures of everything. Opened a secure folder on my laptop and began building a timeline. Not for revenge. Not even for clarity. For protection. If she could lie this easily, this thoroughly, then I had to prepare for what might come next. Later that night, she came home like nothing had happened. She set her keys on the counter and kicked off her shoes with that tired sigh she used to save for long days at the office. I was at the dining room table, laptop open, documents fanned out in front of me. When she saw it, she stopped short. "What's all this?" she asked. "Records," I said. "Timelines. Receipts. Phone logs. You know, things you forgot to delete." She didn't respond right away. Just stared at me like I was the one out of line. "You went through my stuff? You went through our marriage," I snapped. "I'm just cleaning up the wreckage." Melissa walked past me to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine, because of course she did, and leaned against the counter like this was a casual Thursday night conversation. "I told you I didn't plan for this," she said, like that made it noble. "And yet here we are." She took a sip. "Maybe if you had paid more attention to me." "No," I cut in. "Don't you dare." "What? Don't spin this like it's my fault. You disappeared from this marriage long before I ever asked a question. You were gone, Melissa. Emotionally, physically, everything. I was doing the work of two people and you were somewhere else, literally and figuratively. You think I wanted to feel this way?" she said sharply. Like I was suffocating in a life that didn't feel like mine. "You could have said something," I said. "You could have tried. Instead, you lied. For months. You used me. You left our son to wonder why his mom didn't seem to care anymore." She winced at that, but only slightly. "I love Alex," she said quietly. "Then act like it." She didn't respond. I waited, hoping some piece of the woman I used to know would flicker through. But there was nothing. No remorse. No acknowledgement. Just that same mask of fatigue and vague resentment she'd worn for the past year. After she went upstairs, I stayed at the table, sorting through more bank statements. I wasn't looking for confirmation anymore. I was looking for patterns. And sure enough, they were there. Hotel bookings under aliases. Flights billed to an old credit card. Late-night ATM withdrawals. And something else, transfers. Regular, quiet transfers to a new account I didn't recognize. Always small enough to avoid scrutiny. Always spaced just far enough apart. I copied the account number into my notes and highlighted every transaction tied to it. My hands were steady now. Cold, but steady. I was done being shocked. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a slow escape plan. One she'd been laying out like a chess game, piece by piece. And I'd been too loyal, too trusting, too busy trying to hold things together to see it. I emailed everything to a secure folder I'd set up earlier that day. I added backups. I changed passwords. I contacted a lawyer. I wasn't ready to burn it all down, not yet, but the matches were stacked and the gasoline was already leaking. That night, as I lay in Alex's empty bed, the house silent around me, I felt something shift again. I wasn't angry in the way I had been before. I wasn't even heartbroken anymore. I was done waiting for Melissa to show up as the person I remembered. Now I was preparing for war. There's betrayal, and then there's calculated sabotage. The kind where someone smiles to your face, sleeps in your bed, and quietly empties your life behind your back like a thief with a key. That's what Melissa had been doing. And by the time I realized how deep it went, it was too late to stop the damage, only contain it. It started with a transfer. $600 from our joint account to a personal one under her name. Normal at first glance. Melissa handled some of our household bills and freelance project expenses. She had always been good with money, organized, cautious. But then I found another one. $900. Then $1,200. Always small enough to fly under radar. Over 6 months, she'd moved money almost weekly. I traced each transfer, comparing them against our usual expenses. The pattern was clear. None of this money was tied to groceries, utilities, or even credit card payments. I logged into the banking app and pulled transaction history on her linked account. What I saw there nearly made me drop my coffee. Brandon Reese Holdings. The name appeared over and over, listed as a recipient of wire transfers, e-checks, even Cash App transactions. At first, I thought it might be a company, some consulting firm or client she'd been managing. But when I searched it, nothing. No business website, no registration, no contact. Just a few scattered references that led to a P.O. box 2 towns over. I called the bank. They confirmed it. Brandon Reese Holdings was a personal financial entity. In other words, a shell account. Registered under an individual, not a business. Melissa had been transferring money to it, our money. I stared at the total across the last 10 months, $43,800. Gone. I didn't even realize I was standing until I kicked the chair out from under me. My breath was shallow. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. This wasn't an affair anymore. This was a scheme. The final confirmation came that evening. I'd gone back to the hospital to stay the night with Alex. He was awake and groggy but talking again. Melissa was supposed to be getting some rest. She hadn't offered to come back. At around 10:30 p.m. I remembered the voicemail, the second one. The man's voice, calm and low, talking about the rest of the money. I decided to listen again, this time with headphones, sitting in the dim light by Alex's bed. I played it on loop until the pieces clicked. He said, "I just want to make sure we're still good. If he finds the statements, it's over. But I've already locked in the property in my name, so we're okay as long as he doesn't sniff too hard." Locked in the property. In his name. That was it. That was her endgame. She hadn't just been lining up an escape, she was vanishing, piece by piece, behind a man who'd help her disappear. Transferring funds. Buying under a different name. Preparing a life I was never meant to know about, let alone be part of. I should have felt rage. Fire. Fury. But what I felt was colder than that. Like ice in my bloodstream. A slow, tightening grip around my chest. Alex stirred in his bed, muttering something about his leg. I leaned over, smoothed his hair back, and whispered, "You're okay, buddy. I'm here." And I was. I wasn't going anywhere. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I started downloading statements. *TS. Emails. I dug into the insurance files. Every single shared asset we had. If Melissa thought I'd go down quietly, she didn't know me at all. The next day, I called my lawyer. Gave him everything. I told him we were no longer dealing with adultery. We were dealing with financial misappropriation, covert transfers, and potential fraud. His response was immediate and clear: "We're freezing the accounts." That same day, we issued emergency requests to restrict access to our joint assets and began tracking where the missing funds had landed. But before we acted, one more voicemail came in. This one I wasn't expecting. It was from him. "Brandon. Hey, Mel. We need to talk. I'm not comfortable with how this is playing out. 40 grand is a lot of money and I didn't sign up for this kind of exposure. If your husband finds out it came from his accounts, I'm not taking the fall for that. Call me back." My hands clenched the phone like it might shatter. His voice wasn't romantic anymore. "No, babe. No jokes. Just nerves. Panic." Melissa had crossed a line he hadn't agreed to. And he was sweating. And I realized something. She wasn't just planning a clean break. She was trying to vanish, and she needed someone to shield her. But he was cracking. This wasn't just deceit. It was theft. It was fraud. And depending on how she structured those transfers, it could even be money laundering. I recorded every voicemail. Saved every file. I wasn't bluffing anymore. I was building a case. And Melissa had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. The court date came faster than I expected. Maybe it was because I'd been living every day in battle mode, recording, compiling, documenting, but when I finally stood in that courtroom, everything felt surreal. Like I was watching someone else's life unfold from behind glass. Melissa sat across from me at the petitioner's table wearing a charcoal gray suit and a look I couldn't decipher. Not guilt, not shame. Something colder. Controlled. Like this was just another negotiation, another client pitch. Only this time, the product she was trying to protect was her freedom. Her attorney looked more nervous than she did. My lawyer, Angela, bless her for being calm, ruthless, and thorough, stood up and delivered the opening salvo like she was presenting a blueprint of betrayal. We are not only here to discuss infidelity, she said. We are here because Mrs. Reed has actively misappropriated shared assets, concealed financial records, and endangered the financial and emotional stability of a minor child. We will demonstrate intent, deception, and recklessness. Then she dropped the bomb, the full portfolio of voicemails, bank records, the timeline I'd spent weeks putting together. She passed out copies. Melissa didn't even flinch. But the turning point came when the court subpoenaed Brandon Reese. He showed up in a crumpled blazer, clearly not expecting to be dragged into this. When they asked him under oath if he had received money from Melissa Reed, he sighed, rubbed his face, and said, yes. For what purpose? She said it was for a real estate investment, he muttered. She said she wanted to start fresh. That she was getting out of a marriage that was hostile. And did you know the funds came from her marital account? No. I mean, not at first. But when I saw some of the transfers, I figured, look, I didn't ask questions. But I didn't want any part of hiding things. That's why I left. It was over the moment he said that. The judge took a long pause before speaking. Mrs. Reed's actions show a consistent pattern of deception, financial misconduct, and neglect of parental duties. This is not just a broken marriage. This is the erosion of a child's foundation. The gavel fell. Full custody granted to me. Supervised visitation for Melissa. Her access to shared assets? Frozen. Her new life with Brandon? Cracked wide open under oath. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just sat there, folding the edge of her sleeve like she was trying to disappear into the fabric. A week after the ruling, I took Alex to the park. His cast had come off. He walked a little slower than before, but when he saw the swings, he lit up like he used to. I pushed him gently, and for a moment it felt like time turned back just a little. I'm glad you're here, Dad, he said between pushes. I'll always be here, bud. And I meant it. Everything else, every betrayal, every broken promise, every lie had narrowed down to this, him. My son. The only thing that mattered. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat out on the porch with a cup of coffee and silence. No buzzing phone. No half-hearted apologies. No pretending. Just quiet. I watched the sun sink behind the rooftops, casting golden shadows across the street, and I thought about how I'd gotten here. How a man who once bent backward to keep a marriage together had learned to let it go. I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't a win, it was survival. A severing. A reset. But I wasn't bitter anymore. The guilt that had lived in my chest like a second heart was gone. I'd stopped asking what I could have done differently. Stopped wondering if love was enough to fix something that was never solid to begin with. I knew now the person I was fighting to keep hadn't existed for a long time.